On this episode of the Old Fashioned Dad podcast, we're going to be sipping on some Treaty Oak Distilling red-handed rye whiskey, which is bottled in Dripping Springs, Texas. We're also going to be having a candid conversation on leadership, specifically as it pertains to what we've been seeing with the George Floyd protests and riots around the country. How can we as white men and Christians respond in a loving and empathetic way during this time? So stay tuned.
We are the Old Fashioned Dad podcast, seeking to love dads through the person and work of Jesus Christ, entering into tough conversations on faith, God's calling, marriage, parenting, sex, all while enjoying good whiskey. I'm Christian Bringoff.
And I'm Christian Harris.
Thanks for joining us.
So we're going to give you some rye. We're going to give you a lot of rye.
All right, I do like my rye whiskeys.
Okay, this is a 10-year aged rye, so you don't run into that very often.
Okay, and who'd you say it's by?
This is from Treaty Oak Distilling.
Okay.
And it's called red-handed rye whiskey, and it's based in Dripping Springs. I'm not entirely sure where Dripping Springs is, but if it's a Texas whiskey, then it has to be in Texas.
Yeah, that makes sense. Texas is a big nation.
Big
nation.
It sure is.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Real cheers this time.
Effing cheers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, I needed that.
I like that.
That tastes real good.
Yeah.
Got a lot of caramel and vanilla. Typically, rye is kind of spicy.
Okay.
But I'm not really getting a ton of spice right on the front or the back. So, anywho, I'm enjoying this, and I'm glad that I get to sit here with you on a sunny day.
So you care for a cigar?
You know what? I was initially going to be like, nah, but you know what? Now I'm looking at those things, and I'm like, all right.
Okay.
All right.
Good. Well, today we're smoking. It's nothing too special. It's kind of it's made for Thompson Cigar Club, which is down in Miami.
Nice.
I think it's Miami. I don't know, South Florida somewhere. And just their Corojo. Do you speak the Spanish?
I do. I speak.
Corojo Cubano.
I speak Spanish. No, I don't. Ooh, that looks good.
But it's a Churchill, which is a size.
Yeah.
It's pretty good for.
It's like a 7-inch long.
Yeah, Churchills
6-inch long.
Are big.
Cuban.
Good girth to them.
Are we doing the punch or are we doing the...
I like the punch, but...
We're going with the punch today,
Here you go.
All right. Thank you, sir.
But yeah, they're essentially like a $2 cigar, but they smoke like a $10, so... But,
ooh, I like that. More bang for your buck, huh?
Yeah. So you get a block of 25 of these for $50. And it's pretty good for, a quote, everyday smoke, instead of having to always buy the $10 or $15, Macanudo or something.
Are you up to an everyday smoke at this point in the quarantine?
I think about it much more and I actually get a chance to get outside and do it because it's a little bit of an ordeal. It's like, okay, well, I gotta wear clothes. I'm willing to wash and take a shower and because my wife won't get anywhere near me after I've smoked a cigar. So we haven't really got to what we're going to talk about today. So a lot of rambling here, but I think we're going to talk about leadership, right?
Yeah, I think when I was thinking about the topic yesterday, when you brought it up, I was like, man, what a great topic to talk about, especially right now. Yeah, so the leadership topic I think it's a really interesting one, not just from, a biblical place, but I mean, even if you're not a Christian, I think leadership's a really important topic, because we live in America, and so we're governed by a democratic government that seeks to
constitutional republic.
Constitutional
accurate
republic. Thank you. You hear the word democracy more often, but
I do, but it's not a democracy. It's very
sure.
If you read the Federalist Papers by some of the founding fathers, they're very intentional about it not being a democracy, because democracies are the tyranny of the majority,
well,
where the minority has no say. But that was before they could account for such things as social media and the loud voices of the few dominating the conversation.
That's another interesting topic right there too. The loud voices of the few. But yeah, we, Christian or not, we're going to be impacted by leadership, how we lead, and everybody leads, right? Everybody.
Even if you don't lead, they're leading.
Yeah, right.
You're leading by not leading.
Yeah, and
you're a bad leader.
I've seen a lot of so in the wake of we're only I don't even think we're a week removed from the killing of George Floyd. I hope I'm saying that right. George Floyd. Mm-hmm. And I've seen some interesting signs that are being held up. And I think they're directed mostly at white people. And so it says like your silence is choosing a side, and so like,
sure.
And I was thinking about leadership also from that angle too. But yeah, leadership's a really important a topic in the home, in the workplace, in your church, in your friendships. Yeah.
I mean, heck, maybe we should make this a two-part thing on leadership. I mean, I wasn't intending to talk about that, but I mean, that's where my headspace has been most of the day.
Yeah.
And maybe we could bump this up to be released next week and make it more of a relevant conversation.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. I think a lot of people would be impacted and maybe appreciate some of the dialogue back and forth. So,
hopefully, yeah. I mean, I'm really divided on it because my conversation, my thought pattern, within the context of leadership, has been, what do I, as a middle class white man, have to say about, racial tension in America? Granted, we tend to gravitate towards people who are like us, look like us, think like us. You have to really go out of your way to be intentional about having an actual diverse group of friends or community or whatever. Funny enough, the most diverse, communities I find happen via the Holy Spirit in churches. Because whether liberal or conservative, you tend to gravitate towards interest groups. And so it's going to be around politics. So someone who thinks like you or votes like you, or interests like rock climbing, or whatever, that just comes to mind. But the most diverse communities I've ever seen are people that think very differently, have very different life experiences, look very differently, and they all gather around the person and work of Jesus Christ. Now, obviously, churches are still geographically centered, so a church in West Seattle is going to look a lot different than Rainier Valley.
And you're talking about like the demographic makeup.
Yeah. A predominantly black church versus predominantly white church or whatever. And so I mean, all of those things, even though we have the shared experience of Jesus, our life experiences are still going to be different, and hopefully it's diverse enough that we have different voices that can, bring some perspective on it.
Yeah, and how we approach, the church and Jesus, really is somewhat contingent upon just our economic, our racial standing. If you're poor, and you're coming to the church and you're coming to Jesus, like one of your main deals, like I gotta imagine some of your main prayers are going to be like, Lord, I don't want to be poor anymore.
Sure.
Or if you're not white, you're a minority, some of the prayers might be like, Lord, I want to be relevant. I want to be heard. I want my voice to be understood. I want to be seen as an equal, and not be dismissed.
Yeah, I don't want to be oppressed as a main expression of my humanity.
Right. Whereas, and a lot of these topics that I'm saying are very, very broad. But if you're coming at this, from maybe a bit more affluent perspective, and even just generally a white perspective, your prayers are just going to look different. You're just going to approach Jesus, I think, differently. I don't know that I'm wrong on this issue. I'm sure there's probably a lot of perspectives or pieces I don't necessarily see, but I know that when life is going well for you and things are generally looking up, your prayer life looks different.
Initially I was kind of talking about before I lost my train of thought was the reason I haven't really said anything is because my thoughts are, what do I as a middle class white man have to say that adds to the conversation?
Sure.
And then I was thinking in terms of social media, what I've seen, and this could just be, my network of people, both locally and then in the real estate space nationwide, is that it's mostly white people telling other white people that they need to understand black people, and their experience, and recommending, books and whatever else. And to me, like, I understand, I think I understand where the heart is, but to me it seems like the epitome, the height of arrogance to basically say, I don't have this experience, and I probably only know a couple black people, but I'm going to shame all the other white people and, virtue signal that I'm not racist because I'm taking a stand. Now, it's great to take a stand against injustice, but in the grand scheme of things, if that's our metric, there's so much injustice in the world, you wouldn't have time to live life. I mean, like, who decides, what injustice you take a stand for? Because, you could focus on that entirely and, neglect your family and your life and your work and, whatever else.
Sure.
And so the challenge I have internally is, I feel like if I don't say something, there's this kind of subliminal social pressure of, you're going to be lumped in with racist because that's, like you said, that sign. If you don't say something, that's you saying something. That's you taking a stand.
Right.
Well, it's like, well, where does that stop?
Yeah.
I mean, is that like, if I don't say something against, I don't know. I mean, there's all sorts of avenues you could go down, rabbit trails of injustices and things that are wrong or corrupt in the world or in America, whatever. It's like, and for me, that's not my experience. And so it's not, it saddens me, obviously, and angers me that something like that would happen and there's not consequences for it. But me getting on social media and taking a stand, all I'm doing is, like, yelling into an echo chamber of social media. It's not actually doing anything.
Yelling into the void.
Right.
Yeah.
And I was messaging with my office assistant today because she's more liberal than I am. She's like, I feel like we have to do something. It's going to hurt our business if we don't. And I'm like, I don't feel like we do, at least not in what you're thinking, because if it's a matter of like being bullied into having a response because you're going to be labeled as a racist if you don't, I think that's a bad motive. And I was trying to tell her, I don't think the world's not going to be changed by white people taking a stand on social media. It's going to be changed by me having a relationship and conversation and living life with people that look different, have different life experiences than me. That's how things are changed.
Yeah.
But it's way easier to get on social media and, make a proclamation.
Yeah.
Not that you don't need to do that, but I mean, in the reality, it's like that doesn't change the world.
Yeah, and I do agree with you. I tend to think that there is pressure, especially being white, that
Sure.
like if you don't,
especially in Seattle, where
in Seattle too, where being white, it's like if you don't say something, then you're kind of lumped in as almost like far right extremists.
Sure.
And then like if you do say something, really what good is it doing?
Sure.
It's not to say that people speaking up and sharing their opinions and expressing their disappointment, their disgust, the upsetting news of just more racial inequity on Facebook is necessarily a bad thing, but I don't know that it really, like all the outrage on social media, is going to do what people hopes that it will do. So I, being a counselor, I will from time to time do marriage counseling. Mm-hmm. And marriage counseling is just, I would say, one of the hardest forms of counseling. And because you're dealing with two parties that may not necessarily fully agree on what the issue is and just have completely different personality or conversational styles. But oftentimes, and I'm using this maybe hopefully to kind of agree with you. If it sounds terrible, then just cut me off. But oftentimes, married couples, husbands and wives, they're not coming in to see me in kind of a preventative place.
Sure.
They're in crisis. And they come in, and what they're looking for is not even necessarily a Band-Aid or a box of Band-Aids, but they want like emergency surgery done on their marriage.
Sure, triage,
so that yes, great word, triage. They want because it's hemorrhaging. Their marriage is hemorrhaging.
Okay.
and they want to stop the blood loss and prevent divorce, or at least one of them does.
Sure. Or at least fix the other person, because obviously they're the problem.
The other person's always the wrong one.
Yeah.
You know, it's never them. And I unfortunately, or fortunately, sometimes I really enjoy giving this message. Is like I tell the married couple, look, if either one of you, if there's one of you that is like 50% out the door, like marriage counseling's not going to work. Like both of you have to be committed to wanting to reconcile, and both of you have to be in it and committed to reconciling. Because if you're not, then you're just really wasting your time and throwing away your money. Maybe you'll gain some things later on down the road, but it's not going to ultimately prevent divorce if that's your issue. And so I use that as kind of a comparison on racial issues. And so racial injustice happens, a crisis. So George Floyd is killed, murdered, and now there are people that have been protesting racial inequality for a long time.
For decades.
Decades. Yeah. Colin Kaepernick comes to mind. Sure. But then there are people that all of a sudden just like they stand up and they say, we have to do something now. And I equate them to the couple that's coming in to the counselor's office. They've done nothing preventative in their life.
Sure.
But now, because a crisis is happening, now that there's blood loss that's happening, now that hemorrhaging is happening, now they're going to do something. Now they're going to say something. And it's like, well, it's not to say that you can't fix the issue when it's in crisis, but how much more effective could you be if you're preventative?
Sure. It seems very insincere to me. Like,
yeah.
I mean, I have friends and acquaintances that like racial reconciliation has been, a passion of theirs for years. Obviously, they're going to say something like this is, their thing. And like, I'd much rather hear what they have to say because they actually know what they're talking about. They're not just jumping on like the latest bandwagon of whatever the social thing is, So, so I have trouble kind of taking it seriously when the masses are all of a sudden care about something that's been an issue for decades or centuries. It doesn't mean it's not valid. I just have a trouble getting my head around it. Like, and as a white dude, I kind of feel like damn if you do, damn if you don't. Like, I don't really have anything to add to it because that's not my life experience. I can't make it my life experience. I could love people. I could try to be compassionate and understanding where they're coming from and try to do more listening than talking. But when I'm getting on social media and, making a statement, that's not me listening. That's me making a statement. And that's what most people are doing.
Yeah.
I mean, I've seen a handful, one particular, friend who basically said, this is to my, African American friends. What do you think? What's your experience? And some woman chimed in and said, hey, this is a great book. She's like, I'm not talking to you. I don't want to hear from, my white friends. I want to hear from my black friends, and even that, like, I don't know how that's perceived, by African Americans in the sense of like, I'd imagine you get tired after a while of your white friends coming up to you and be like, okay, what's the deal? What's the deal with this racial stuff? Or maybe having good intentions, but they don't have a framework for like the day in, day out,
Right.
To me, and as Christians, I think we have a unique perspective in the sense of like, we're not, the majority of what I've seen is people, trying to place their hope in humanity or the government or whatever. And, as Christians, we know like that's not the answer. I mean, the ultimate reconciler is Jesus, like the ultimate solution to our corruption and our racism and our, human condition is Jesus, and so like, I think that's where we need to look, but just quoting a Bible verse also isn't the same as being intentional and seeking racial reconciliation in your life or whatever, I mean, to my office assistant, my response to her when she said, I think we need to do something is basically, or post something, have a statement, was basically like, change is done one person, one relationship, one conversation at a time. And I don't feel compelled to make a statement out there. I'd much rather, when I see injustice in my life, that's when I'm called to act. Not when I see injustice on the interwebs, taken to the internet and social media isn't going to change anything. It's just not. So what's the point? Like, I've only got so much energy, and it'd be much better spent trying to do good and make an influence and follow Jesus and be a good leader in the places God's placed me, as opposed to trying to put my nose in, the public realm of public opinion or whatever else. I don't know, and maybe that's a cop out, but that's just kind of my perspective on things. It matters, but I can't directly do anything about that issue if it's not in my life.
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree with you. I was thinking about this
It would
today.
be much more interesting if you were disagreeing. Come on, Christian.
You're wrong, damn it. I think I was thinking on this issue today, and I've been thinking on it for the last 4 days, really. But I was thinking, like, and I know this we'll tie it all back to leadership, but how many of these protesters that are protesting, like, there's genuine protesters and there's not. Yep. How many of them will still demand justice in a month, 4 months, a year, 5 years?
Sure.
How many of them will still be wanting things to change in America on a national level? But I started thinking about, like, getting the right president, getting the right policies in place, retraining police, lessening the divide in income inequality, all good things, but those things don't necessarily change the individual heart.
Sure.
And I think that's really honestly where the battle is.
Yeah.
And if you're somebody who's outraged, somebody who's grieved at the violence that was directed towards, George Floyd and any other African American, and we have literally thousands of examples. If you're outraged by that, then how does that change you on an individual basis? I think that God places us in a particular neighborhood, in particular jobs, schools, careers, and churches to be influenced and to influence in the sphere of people that are around us. And at the very least, we need to be consistent in how we serve them and how we love them. And that's going to have, in my opinion, more positive impact on racial inequality and racial inequity, in addition, I suppose, to large national policy changes.
Sure. Well, I mean, I couldn't disagree with you.
Damn it!
And that's an interesting conversation in the context of leadership too. It's like, this is a large, national conversation right now. Like riots in over a dozen cities, and sounds like most of them start off as peaceful protests and whatnot. But the thing is, like, if this is a systematic societal issue, it's not society's fault. Society is made up of individuals.
Yeah.
Like you said, like, it's individual human hearts that are the problem. You can't legislate morality in the sense of, like, someone's motive being pure. Yeah. You can make someone follow the rules, but they can still hate whatever, people that are unlike themselves.
Absolutely.
And so, I mean, like you said, I don't think, that's one piece of the pie for, fixing the injustices in America, but it really comes down to, are people going to be changed? I mean, and that's the tough thing about kind of the conversation about, like, okay, the people that are passionate about this today, are they going to be passionate about it in a week, in a month? Like, are they just going to jump on the next fad? Not now. I try to be very cognizant of. I don't like people assessing my motive, and so I try not to do that to others. The people that are protesting, I assume the best. I assume that they're out there to actually stand up to a real injustice. Obviously, the rioting and that kind of distracts and takes away from that. I wasn't there. I don't know, if it's the same people, if it's different people, but it seems like it leads to more division, more hatefulness, more less compassion. It's almost like the irony of like being compassionate for something like this leads to them actually being more closed off and more segregated and more hateful.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I mean, it's my experience is here in Seattle, which is in the grand scheme of the country is pretty affluent and great place to live and stuff. But I mean, I've seen a lot of tribalism, and most people.
Thank you for using that word. I love that.
Yeah, and most people aren't aware of their own tribalism.
Yeah.
They're willing to demonize those Republicans or those conservatives or those whatever. All those specifics aside, they don't realize how closed off they are and how quick they are to throw the baby out with the bathwater and demonize people that don't respond like them. Or, and I'm thinking about that just in the context of, like people that hold up the sign basically saying your lack of response is a response. Basically like if you're not with us, you're against us.
Yeah.
And I think that's a very dangerous perspective. I understand the idea is you need to stand against injustice, and I've seen parallels made to Nazi Germany and how they got to that place, and this is us getting to that place, and I'm just like, that's a very inaccurate historical representation of what happened there.
Sure.
How that happened, was largely due to the people saying, hey, just trust the government, just whatever they say. And ironically, at least what I've seen, it's the left that tend to be like, just trust the government, just do what you're supposed to do, just wear your damn mask, just whatever it is. I don't know. I'm kind of going off a rabbit trail. I guess I'm trying to think of what my point is here. I guess it kind of all comes back to Jesus. I think and kind of brings people who naturally wouldn't be together. And I think even part of this racial reconciliations, it's not very natural. And what is very natural is sin, is selfishness, is looking after yourself. I don't know. That's a whole nother topic to go on.
No, I think, man, you make some really fantastic points. And we're making really great points tonight. I think it's awesome.
I hope someone hears them. Hopefully they don't just go into a void and I'm going to make another point here.
Right.
You're kind of talking about how, I think we both kind of made the point, that change is done one conversation at a time, via relationships, right? Not via, mass social media. And I think it really depends on what your goal is. If your goal is to virtue signal on a trending topic, great, go to social media. Or if you want to win, or if you want to, stake a claim for your tribe. But if you actually want to change hearts, that takes real work.
Yeah.
That takes sacrifice. That takes compromise. That takes patience.
Yeah.
So I think it really depends on what you want to do. And the people that have a long view of this and have been talking about this and passionate about it for years, I'm going to listen to them because they're the ones doing the hard work. They're not the ones just jumping on, something happened in the media and now we're going to go make a show of force for a weekend.
So regarding like whiteness and like leadership, I think that, the way that, at least I can say this for myself, okay. How I've kind of thought about it is the best way that I'm going to lead on this, is simply by entering into humility. And saying like, hey, I'm not gonna speak words at you. I'm simply just gonna like try and be the hands and feet of Jesus. Like that's how I'm gonna try and approach this situation, because the last thing you need, probably, at least when it comes to racial conversations, is another white guy, trying to white-splain.
Sure, yeah.
And some of our listeners, I'm sorry if it feels like maybe I'm getting down on white people. I'm not. I'm trying to enter into a rather delicate conversation where I'm trying to strike a balance where we need to love black people. We need to love all people, and I think as Christians we rather suck at that. I think we end up standing, we end up are more for what we're against, and that's oftentimes from a distorted lens too, and we're not known for what we are for. For me, like I have a wonderful, I love him to death, business partner, African American. He's like, we do counseling together. He's just like, we went to grad school together. We've shared some good times and some hard times together, and he joined up my practice, and I love him dearly. And even before all this sort of stuff happened, we've had lots of great conversations over the last 4 or 5 years. And he's shared some of his like fears and his concerns just being a black man, and I don't know, just hearing that really just made me be like, man, I don't get it. I don't get it.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff that I don't get, and so I don't need to be the guy that is just speaking at African Americans, black people, even white people, and telling them this is how you need to view race. I don't need to be that guy. And so what I need to be is just the guy that's like, hey, I love you. How can I serve you? And I think, at least in this sense, for me, I think that's what leadership looks like.
Yeah, that's good words. I mean, hopefully our listeners, despite whatever their political, persuasions are, have stuck with us this far. I know for me, a little bit of my story is that, I would consider myself, probably pretty centrist, maybe a little right of center, whatever, but that's all relative, And so I really pushed back for the longest time on this idea of white privilege. Like I just couldn't wrap my head around it. It just seemed like you're trying to shame me for being white. I can't help that, And I think what really brought it home for me was this matter of perspective. Like being a white person, my experiences in life are shaped a certain way, as opposed to maybe someone who's black and has a regular run-ins with being pulled over because they drive a nice car, or they're in the wrong neighborhood, or they look not very white, wearing a hoodie or something, and once I started thinking about that more and hearing more stories and experiences from my black friends, knowing people who have had those injustices done to them and had those experiences that I haven't had opens your eyes that not, and I can't change my experiences, right? I can't change that in my life, but understanding that other people who look differently or grew up differently have different experiences, that can make me more understanding and compassionate and less defensive.
Yeah.
It's a tough conversation to have, or a tough thing to wrap your mind around, because I personally, think that the world would be a better place if we, were more colorblind. But that's not the reality of the world we live in, And so, the question is, how can I make a difference in my life? And for me, God's called me to love the people that I'm in relationship with, whether that's in business as a real estate broker, or as a father to my son, and just other relationships God's brought us into, and outside of that, you're just spreading yourself too thin if you're trying to touch other people and other issues that aren't immediately in your life, if that's not what God's calling you to.
Yeah. I wanted to go back to something you said earlier. You used a word I just love. I've been thinking on a lot lately, is tribalism. And I think that there needs to be a distinction made between like having a tribe versus engaging in tribalism.
Okay.
Where everybody kind of has a tribe, be it like a family of origin, the career you work in, the race that you are connected to, ethnicity, religion. Everybody kind of has a tribe. even like, even it even goes into like sports and like, I don't know, like stuff like comic books and video games. Like everybody kind of has a tribe.
Sure, you find your people, like
Right.
people that get you.
Right. Like I'm a big I'm a big whiskey guy, and for the longest time, my tribe was single malt Scotch whiskey, and now it's kind of shifted into bourbon. Still have a lot of respect for single malt Scotch whiskey. My palate just doesn't prefer it right now. Bourbon's it, But it would be wrong of me to be like, man, those people that drink single malt Scotch whiskey, just idiots, just morons. Like they have no idea what they're doing. They have no taste, no flavor. And I don't want to try and compare like whiskey to race, but there is an element in there that is similar. So, and this is where it moves from having a tribe to tribalism, is where you begin to think that your tribe is better
Sure.
than other people's tribe.
Yeah.
And as Christians, man, that is definitely not the point. As Christians, man, like we're definitely meant to, like, Christianity's our tribe. But when it comes to other tribes, man, we love them.
Sure. Well, most people have multiple tribes, I think that's a good point, is that essentially, what creates or what leads to tribalism is a pride or a supremacy that your tribe gets it and no one else does.
Yeah.
And while that's easy to see with something like racism, it's much harder to see in something like, like here in Seattle, I see a lot that people just assume everyone around them is liberal. And so they just talk shit about conservatives or Christians or whatever, without even considering that, hey, maybe that person you just met doesn't share your worldview. But they're so arrogant and presumptuous that that's just the water they swim in, that they don't even realize that's their thing.
Like, how could you believe anything other than what
Right,
I believe?
Right. And to be fair, when I go visit the South, I see the same thing with conservatives.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, but I think that's when it gets dangerous, because, you're basically, the same issue that racism is tribalism. I mean, it is the same thing. You're saying my group of people, whatever we're centered around, is better than your group of people. And that as soon as you do that, you're not listening anymore. You're just trying to win. You're just trying to make points. You're trying to,
Yeah, excellently stated. I really can't disagree with it, honestly.
So I mean, unless you get
No.
something to say here.
No.
So I mean, kind of trying to bring it back to leadership, I guess. I mean, I kind of think that, you're mentioning earlier in the episode about how you saw a protester holding up a sign basically saying, if I don't remember, what was it?
Like, essentially, if you don't speak up, like
your silence is deafening kind of thing. Or
your silence is your position,
okay.
Basically.
We're all leaders in our own way, in our own domain. At least, in my perspective, from what God teaches through the Bible.
Yeah.
Is specifically, us as men, we're first called to be, if you're a dad, you're called to be a leader of, your kids, of your wife, the head of the house, and obviously what that looks like is debated amongst, Bible-believing Christians. But specifically, even as a single man, you're called to be a leader of yourself. If you can't lead yourself first with, self-control and being led by God and the Holy Spirit, you can't be a good leader if you're not already a good follower. And so it's not like, either or. It's like we both have to be good followers and good leaders. But you have to know who you're following and be very intentional about, how you're leading. And I'll say, because some people are just like, oh, I don't want to lead. I don't want to be in that position. Well, you making that statement is being a leader. You're being a bad leader. You really suck at leading. You're failing. You're abdicating your responsibility to either lead yourself or to lead your family or whatever. But you are taking a stance.
Right.
And I guess I say that in the context of leadership because we don't have the option to to not be a leader, to not follow God, to not call our family to follow God. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I guess that's kind of where my mind goes as far as like the ultimate role of leadership, and I think obviously that can take forms as you know a business owner and having employees and what kind of leader you are to them, or in the military, like I am, like what kind of leader you are to your soldiers, and kind of going that whole route of I don't know if you've ever read much Simon Sinek, but came out with a book called Leaders Eat Last, coming from his kind of research of the military, and that's very much the culture of the military. Is like, if you're a leader, you take care of your soldiers first, period. They eat first, they get taken care of first, their pay goes first. After your soldiers take care of, then you can think about yourself.
And that's, I don't know, is Simon, what was the last name? Sinek, a Christian author?
No, he's kind of known for his Know Your Why.
Okay.
It's a big TED Talk a few years back.
I think we see a fantastic example in the New Testament, and you'll know what I'm talking about when I say it, where Jesus is like washing his disciples' feet. First of all, that was kind of a dishonoring thing to do, like the foot. Everybody's walking all day long, and it's just gross to touch the feet, and leaders just didn't do that, But
that's a job for the slaves.
Yeah, exactly. The commoner, the peasant, what have you. And here you have Jesus, who, God, King of the universe, gets down on his hands and knees, and he washes his disciples' feet. And I think even some of the disciples were kind of like, "What? What do you? No, you shouldn't be doing this." And but Jesus came and introduced a radical leadership that is based in humility and servitude. Is that a word? Servitude?
Yeah.
Based in humility and servitude. And that's, and I don't even want to say like it's speckled throughout the Gospels. It's saturated.
Oh, it's prominent.
It's like the main central theme of the Gospels. And so like that's why it's radical, is because human leaders, if you go back and you look at the Old Testament, like the books of Chronicles and the books of First and Second Kings and Judges, like it's all about those leaders, those kings, getting whatever they wanted whenever they wanted.
Sure. Being served.
Yeah, doing, basically oppressing everybody because they wanted whatever it is they felt they were entitled to. And so Jesus comes in, and this is why, in a lot of ways Christianity is just so completely different, is that Jesus offers a radical form of leadership, a leadership that says, be humble and serve. And that, that's a fantastic model to apply to fatherhood. If I'm going to give a hot take, and that is, if all fathers in America, regardless of race, were all engaging in humility and serving, like their families and their children's, and the people that are in their kind of local sphere, we may not be encountering some of the issues that we are. That's a hot take, meaning that that ain't going to happen.
Is that your final answer?
Yeah. But there is something to, albeit that formula.
Yeah. I've always liked the phrase, servant leader. You lead through humility by serving the people that you're responsible for.
Right.
Right. And Jesus, was, him doing that was scandalous. It was unheard of.
Massively.
And I think that translates not just to generic leadership, but to leading our family, loving our wives. When things are going sideways with Jenny, I try to remind her and remind myself, if we were trying to outdo each other on kindness and serving each other, our fight right now wouldn't be happening. No one goes to a counselor and be like, he's just being too nice to me. He's giving me what I want, and he's,
Zero. I've heard that 0 times.
Yeah, it's usually because they feel offended. They're, whatever their perceived needs are not being met, and they're demanding that from the other person.
Yep.
And that is not leadership. That is, they want to be served.
Yep.
And I see that in bring it back to fathering. I mean, usually when I get the most pissed at my sons because he is thwarting my lordship and not doing what I want him to do.
I like that lordship. I need to use that with my kids.
Yeah. But I mean, he's getting in the way of my expectations of being listened to, respected, served, whatever, or just to have an easy day where he actually does what I ask him to do, But God reminds me that like my job here is not to have an easy life where my wife and my son serve me, but for me to love and serve them so that they grow, my wife can flourish, and my son can grow up to love Jesus and be kind and compassionate to other people. That's all I got.
No, I don't know that we've got much more to say on this issue, at least for this particular episode. We might make this a two-parter.
A twofer?
Yeah, a twofer. So if you guys tune in for the additional following episode, then you'll maybe hear more. Maybe you'll hear more of the same. Either way, we're going to unpack this thing, I think, a little bit more. But I think what we've stated on leadership, if people are listening and they've stayed this far, the bullet points that I would take away from it is, or I hope that they take away from it too, is it's like, look, leadership needs to be radical, and not in the sense where you take power, but in the sense where you show humility and you show servanthood, and that should impact economics, financial systems, government systems, and race and ethnicity, sexuality, parenting. There we go. That's what I wanted to say.
Okay. God's calling to us is holistic. It encompasses our entire life.
Yep. If you're listening today and you're going to take away anything, radicalize your leadership ability. First, recognize that you are a leader, whether you want to believe it or not. You are a leader. You do have influence in other people's lives. And when you lead from humility, lead from a humble place, and serve. That is going to have far more impact in change than, say, an aggravated protest. Not to say that those things don't have their place, but true change, I believe, comes from this model that we see prominently within Christ of humility and servanthood.
Yeah. Well, I would love to hear all 5 people that listen to this. I'd like to hear their response. If they go over to our Instagram, it's kind of where we're living for the show.
Yep.
Old Fashioned Dad Podcast Instagram. Leave a comment on our post about this episode, or DM us. We'd love to hear kind of your thoughts, or just get to know you. Hopefully it'd be encouraging, and if you have any ideas for future episodes. And of course, subscribe, share with your other dad friends.
We would love, obviously, the more subscribers, the more ratings that we get. I always kind of hate talking about that a little bit, but the more subscribers, the more ratings that we get, the more that it kind of gets out there, and the more people are going to hear our message. And we're not trying to compete with churches. We're not trying to necessarily compete with pastors. We want dads to be in churches. We want dads to be serving. We want dads to be sitting under leadership within a church. But we want to be kind of supplementary. We want to encourage dads. We want to love them. But the more our podcast kind of gets out there, the more dads can hear this, and hopefully we can be helpful and be loving and kind. And Christian, I wanted to share with you. I've actually heard from a couple of dads on our Instagram page,
nice.
and they're saying they're being encouraged already, and I felt encouraged by that. I was like, man, if just one dad hears this,
sure,
and feels encouraged by that's awesome. And this dad shared with me just some of, they were driving, listening to our podcast, and hearing some of the stuff, and it was creating new thought for them and insight. And I was like, wow, I mean, you can go for years in ministry and never hear something like that.
Sure.
You know.
That's awesome. I mean, I just do this as an excuse to drink your whiskey and hang out. But if other people, are encouraged by our conversation, that's great.
I just do this to hang out with you.
Yeah. That's awesome. Well, thanks for joining us, everyone.
Yeah, thank you for joining us, everybody, tonight. As always, we love you. We care about you. Please do, like Christian said, DM us on our Instagram page. Until we meet again, Christian.
All right. See you next week.
See you next week.